crazy. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Martinez with Harris County Public Library, and thank you for joining us as we continue our Hispanic Heritage Month celebration. Today, we are proud to partner with Arte Publico Press to present Our Heroes in History, Hispanic Icons, with authors Roni, Capin, Rivera-Ashford, and José Angel Gutiérrez. Moderated by Yes Prep White Oak teacher, Jessica Santos. If you have any questions or comments, please be sure to leave them in the comment section as the program is going on. Before we begin our program, I wanted to share some information about our upcoming event launching on October 14th at 6 p.m. at the Katy Branch Library, a new series of programs with our partners, Apollo Chamber Players, called Library Voyage. Extending over the next 3 seasons, Apollo Chambers will present a variety of programs with diverse collaborators at all 26 HCPL branches, each specifically curated in conjunction with library programming, focus, and on multicultural celebrations. So on October 14th at 6 p.m., bring a chair or blanket and join us live at the first stop at the Katy Branch Library. Thank you for your time, and now we're proud to present Our Heroes in History, Hispanic Icons. Hi, Jessica.
Hello, my name is Jessica, and I will be your moderator today. I am a proud Cuban American, and I teach 9th grade in GS Prep White Oak, just like she said. I'm a 9th grade English teacher, and I teach a very diverse group of students, most of which are Hispanic, so I am no stranger to the Hispanic young readers. I am here to introduce our authors, both José Angel Gutiérrez and Roni Capin Rivera. Before I do so, I am going to also be speaking in Spanish for those of us who are tuning in Spanish. So, buenas tardes, mi nombre es Jessica. Como acabo de decir, yo soy cubana-americana y voy a ser la que modera esta tarde. Yo enseño 9º grado inglés en Yes Prep White Oak y hoy vamos a estar hablando de los autores Roni Capin Rivera y José Ángel Gutiérrez. Primero vamos a conocer a José Ángel. José Ángel es un profesor de la Universidad de Texas, Arlington, y él enseñó political science. So first we're going to meet our author, José Ángel. He is a professor at University of Texas, Arlington, and he taught political science. He wrote the book Ignacio Zaragoza Seguín, My Story of Cinco de Mayo. So here we go.
Buenas tardes, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining in. I hope you like the cover. Isn't it beautiful? Y está en español y en inglés, so es un libro bilingüe. Yo voy a leer parte del libro en inglés. In English, I'm going to do my reading in English. So let me tell you first, Ignacio Zaragoza was one of us, a Texan. He was born there in Goliad, Texas. That's about an hour and a half from Houston going toward Victoria. And then when the Texas Revolution occurred, his family had to move. They fled to Mexico. And there, as a young man, he grew up looking at the military. His father was military. So he joined the Mexican army. And when the French invaded Mexico many, many years later, he was the hero because he stopped them at the Battle of Puebla. It was just a battle, not the war. He didn't defeat the French, but it delayed him long enough for President Benito Juárez to move and leave everything out of Mexico City and go all the way up near El Paso. That's why the border town is called Juárez in Chihuahua, because that's where Benito Juárez hid out until they were able to capture, the Mexican army was able to capture the French emperor that was put in there, Maximiliano, and then be able to restore the Mexican government again. So that's who he is. And he is one of our icons because we celebrate the Cinco de Mayo in the United States and in Texas more so than do in Mexico, because he is a Tejano. He's one of us. He's a Chicano, a Mexican American, if you will. He's more of a hero for us than he is over in Mexico, because to them it was only one battle. So here we go. You saw the cover. Chapter 1 starts like this: is who I am, and I'm going to read as if I was him, because I wrote it as if it was him. First person. Así se dice. My full name is Ignacio Zaragoza Seguín, mis santos. Ignacio Zaragoza Seguín. I became a general in the Mexican army. My troops won the Battle of Puebla against the French on May 5, 1862, which is celebrated as a holiday known as Cinco de Mayo. This is the story of how I became a hero. When I was growing up, I learned a lot from my parents, my mother mostly. In school, I always asked questions, but as I grew older, I learned a lot more from books. I loved to read about history. Books were my special ships, capable of sailing me to other lands in my mind. My father, Miguel Zaragoza Valdez, was a handsome man and a soldier. The Zaragozas were a military family. This military tradition ended with me, though, because my sons died as infants. My mother's side was the Seguin family. She was Maria de Jesus Seguin, from Texas. So I'll stop there because I want to get through some things to get your interest. This is chapter 2, okay? How my parents met. My mother, Maria de Jesus Seguin, was born in one of the 5 missions along the San Antonio River, one named San Antonio de Valero. Missions were usually protected by forts called presidios. My mother was born in the Presidio del Espíritu Santo de la Bahía in southern Texas. She grew up there, and later I would spend part of my childhood there. My father first saw my mother walking at the plaza in front of San Fernando Cathedral in San Antonio. He was on guard duty at the Army headquarters across the street from the plaza. That's when my father asked some friends who the pretty girl was. He wanted to court Maria de Jesus. My mother confessed to me that she knew he was not the best man for her because of his military duties. He was always going to be on patrol and spending days with other soldiers. She nevertheless served her merienda with strong coffee and sometimes sweet. I drank tea because I hated coffee. And during these meriendas, she would tell me story after story about my father. Elodio, my older brother, did not like to hear the stories. He preferred to be outside playing. Let me move on to chapter 3. The chapters are longer, but I just want to give you a little taste so you want to go read the book. Chapter 3. Mexico wins independence. Over pan de polvo, my favorite cookie, and her coffee during our meriendas, my mother told me the story of how Mexico became independent from Spain. According to her and the books I later read, the Mexican War for Independence began in 1810. It was set off when 2 Catholic priests, Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla and José María Morelos, began agitating their parishioners to protest and fight the Spanish rule. They wanted equal rights for people born in New Spain, Mexico. Spaniards from Europe dominated everything and thought themselves superior to the people of indigenous and mixed racial backgrounds, or even the children born of Spaniards in the New World in Mexico. Both priests were captured in battles and killed by the Spanish army. After a long war, in which many people of all backgrounds died, Native Americans, mestizos, Creoles, and others, Spanish Queen Isabella II surrendered and signed the Treaty of Córdoba that lasted, the last boy, María de Jesús Seguín, was born then. I was 16-year-old by then. My clearest recollections, though, are of my older brother, not my younger sisters or little brother. Let me move on to the last chapter I'm going to read from so we can hear about the other book that's coming. Chapter 4. Texas War for Independence. Although Texas still belonged to Spain, the Spanish king allowed Anglo-Americans from the United States to come and settle. The king gave them land that belonged to the Native Americans, and they encouraged more Anglos to move there. When Mexico won its war and became independent of Spain in 1821, the practice of giving lands to Anglos continued. In 1825, Stephen F. Austin, son of the first Anglo to get a land grant from Spain, was among the first legally admitted settlers by Mexico. This country gave him and his group of settlers land as long as they promised to return to be loyal to Mexico, be good Catholics, and not bring African slaves into Mexico. But the Anglos did not abide by these laws against slavery. Stephen F. Austin himself had 443 African slaves by 1830. By the time of the Texas Revolution in 1835, there were more than 5,000 African slaves in Texas. Many Anglos, like Austin, recognized the independence of Mexico on August 21st, 1821. That same year, my father was transferred from Nacogdoches to San Antonio. My father had to change his uniform, Spanish, and swear allegiance to a new flag, the Mexican flag. The Spanish flag we had at home was pretty, with the king's crown, lions, castles, and two bright colors. I was curious as to why the Mexican flag had an eagle with a snake in its claws and in beak while perched on a nopal cactus. The colors were bright, red, white, green. It turned out the Mexican flag commemorates the founding of Tenochtitlan, the Aztec capital which became Mexico City. In this way, the new Mexican Republic identified with the indigenous people of the New World. In fact, most names of cities and many other places still carry the Nahuatl names. My mother said that as long as she could remember, one group of Mexicans who wanted equality and freedom fought with another group of Spanish loyalists who wanted a Catholic monarch to rule. She said that back then there was not much difference between government and the church because the Catholic Church had all the money and the government had little and would have to borrow from the Catholic Church. Soon the Spanish loyalists would clash with the liberals who wanted a new nation, a Mexico free and independent of European control. And that's when the French came, and that's when Ignacio Zaragoza fought that battle. You got to buy the book to finish reading all the stories. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose. We will now be introducing our next author, Roni. Roni is an ex-teacher, and she considers herself an educator still through her writing. She grew up in the Arizona-Mexican border, meaning that it had a huge influence on her life and on her writing. She started writing for her kids, and this developed into writing for just about everyone. She continues to educate today, and she hopes to continue to do so. A very interesting fact that she shared with me was that she was invited by Disney to write a companion book to the movie Coco, which is also available for purchase. Now we're going to hear the author herself, Roni Capin, speak on the book that she wrote, Raulito, the first Latin governor of Arizona. Ahora vamos a hablar con Roni, que escribió Raulito, el primer gobernador de Arizona. Ella era una maestra y se considera todavía una maestra porque ella escribe para enseñar. Ella creció en Arizona, que tuvo una gran influencia en su vida y empezó a escribir para sus niños y ahora escribe para todos. Disney le le pidió que escribiera un libro para que fuera con la historia de Coco, que es una película muy popular de Disney y lo pueden comprar todavía. Ahora vamos a hablar con Roni.
Muchas gracias, Jessica. Y mucho gusto estar aquí con todos ustedes. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you this afternoon. I've been working on Raulito for about 8 years. I met Raúl Castro 9 years ago, and I had the pleasure of meeting him because he was living in Nogales, Arizona, on the border of Nogales, Arizona, and Nogales, Sonora, ambos Nogales. That's where I grew up. So the way I met him was there was actually an article in the newspaper in Tucson, Arizona, which is where I live now. That's 60 miles north of Nogales. And there was an article about him and his wife, and I wanted to send them a copy of my first 2 books. And I'll get out of the way here. I have behind me here the 5 books that I have published already. My Nana's Remedies, Los Remedios de mi Nana. My Tata's Remedies, Los Remedios de mi Tata. And the Disney books. And Hip Hip Hooray, It's Monsoon Day. Ajua, ya llegó el chubasco. So I wanted to get some books to him and his wife as a gift. And that's how I came to meet him. I myself am from an Eastern European Jewish family, now American, of course, pioneers to the borderlands. Y allí yo me crié toda la vida aprendiendo cómo hablar, leer y escribir en español. And to me, it's been a lifelong gift to be bilingual and maybe trilingual, or I speak a little bit of French because I took 6 years of it in school. So I encourage everybody to learn more than one language. Es un beneficio muy grande. I'm very grateful to Harris County Public Library for having us here today, and for Arte Publico Press, Piñata Books, for publishing Raulito, the first Latino governor of Arizona. It's a flip book, también está en español, en el mismo libro, y se llama Raulito, el primer gobernador de Arizona. Lo importante es que Raulito no fue solo gobernador, pero también fue juez, embajador, educador y muchas cosas más. So what I want to tell you about the book that is so dear to my heart, because I wrote it with Governor Castro. I call him Governor Castro. And he's now passed. He passed away almost 6 years ago. And before he left this earth, I got to meet with him over 2 years and talk to him about his life and ask his blessing to write his story. And he was delighted to know that there would someday be a book besides the autobiography that he wrote about himself that would be for all people, younger people. The one he wrote is more for adults. This book is geared, it says, for 8 to 12-year-olds. I would like to say that I think it's for 8 to 108-year-olds, because I do believe that adults will enjoy the story too. And it is also, as Professor Gutierrez's book, it's divided into chapters. So I will share with you here, like we have the table of contents. Oops, maybe you can see that. So chapter 1 is called A Grain of Sand. Chapter 2 is called Teach a Child to Fish. Chapter 3 is Raulito to Raúl. Chapter 4, Yes, You Can, Sí se puede. Chapter 5, This Land is Your Land. Chapter 6, Providence. There are some photographs in the middle of the book. Then chapter 7, humble beginnings. Chapter 8, a time of growth. Chapter 9, a beacon of light. Chapter 10, it takes a village. Chapter 11, a world-class citizen. Chapter 12 is second chances. Chapter 13, dream big, which we all should do, because dreams do come true. I will tell you that. This is one of them for me. Chapter 14, leave your mark. And chapter 15, bridges of life. And when I was working on the book, I was speaking with a gentleman who is an illustrator, and he's an artist who was the art director of Arizona Highways magazine for over 20 years. His name is Gary Bennett, and he put his heart and soul into coming up with the cover art. The entire image of the cover was put together at Arte Publico Press, but Gary Bennett did the major artwork. And this is something that I came up with in my amateur way to show Gary what I was thinking of, like the Arizona flag, the United States flag, a picture of Governor Castro and his footsteps, the flags of where he was also ambassador. So many different images, and that's what you see on the screen, the cover now that he put together. Now I'll read you a little bit from the book itself, and every chapter I gave you the titles of the chapters, but I will tell you that underneath the title there is also a famous quote. So I had a lot of fun working on that with the help of my husband and my daughter, who were my editors. Okay, so the acknowledgements. Raúl H. Castro is the reason for this book. Every step of the journey he lived became the legacy he left. And the gift he left me was the blessing to write and share his story with you. Then there's a letter of introduction, which he wrote in 2013. And he wrote it because he knew I was working on the book. At that time, he was 97 years old. And he says, on June 12, 2013, I turned 97 years old. I'm writing this to you, knowing that when you read it, I may not be here on earth anymore. So this is a message I want to leave for you. You might ask who I'm writing this to. I'm writing to whoever is reading this right now. A boy or a girl, an adult, a student, a teacher, a parent, you, the reader. The important thing is that you are here, reading and learning about many things. Perhaps you are learning more than one language, just like I did. I know how to speak, read, and write in more than one language because I grew up speaking both Spanish and English in my family and didn't give it up. I never allowed anyone to take my languages, culture, or beliefs away from me. So there's more to the letter, but of course, you will read that after you purchase the book or check it out at the library. Once it's available, it will be available by next month sometime. And Raulito is calling you. All right, so I'm going to read you a few little pieces from the book itself. This is from chapter 3, from Raulito to Raúl. And it says, the quote there says, you can change all things for the better when you change yourself for the better, by Jim Rohn. By middle school, Raulito was called Raúl by his teachers and most of his classmates. Several teachers would ask him, why aren't you a good artist? You know, Raúl, that almost all Mexican people know how to use bright colors in beautiful ways. What they did not know was that Raúl was born colorblind. unable to distinguish between red and green. As an adult looking back on that experience, Raúl realized these teachers were stereotyping him. Another paragraph from that chapter is telling us that one day Mrs. Wright, his 6th grade teacher, put her hand on his shoulder and said, "Raúl, you're a very smart boy, but you don't do your work. You're not letting your true potential shine. If you apply yourself and give it your best, you can be at the top of your class." From that day forward, Raúl was always motivated to do his best. And how he did that and the sacrifices he made are in the rest of the story. Chapter 4 is called Yes You Can, Si Se Puede. And the quote for that chapter is from Babe Ruth, and it says, "Every strike brings me closer to the next home run." So a few paragraphs down, and these chapters are not very long, but they are very full of information and detail. Just before Raúl graduated, his high school principal advised him, quote, "Even though you're an excellent student, Raúl, you'd best look for a job here in town. You won't get into college because you're Mexican. It does not matter that you speak, read, and write in 2 languages." Raúl was disheartened by this advice and had a hard time envisioning his future. A few paragraphs below it says, "But one day at his after-school job, he was high on a ladder washing windows when he felt a tug on his pant leg." Quote, "Raúl Castro?" A man from below called up. "I know all about your good grades and achievements in sports. I'm a recruiter from the Arizona State Teachers College in Flagstaff, here to offer you an athletic scholarship for football." So that's toward the end of chapter 3, or chapter 4, I'm sorry. Okay, now we skip to chapter 9, and there are 5 chapters in between with a lot of information, which you will enjoy once you have your book. Chapter 9 is called A Beacon of Light. The quote by Jimmy Johnson says, "Give people enough guidance to make the decisions you want them to make." Raúl served as Superior Court judge for 6 years, 3 of those in juvenile court. Judge Castro would use this opportunity to share some of his personal stories to get the juveniles' attention and hopefully help them make a positive shift. Quote, "Who do you think I am? Do you think I come from a rich white family? I was born in Mexico. My immigrant parents were poor. My father was a miner and died of lung disease when I was 12. I picked cactus fruit in the desert for food when I was a little boy. I did hard labor as a farm worker in the fields, but I went to school and worked hard. I became a United States citizen and I never gave up. Now I am a judge, here to help you turn your life around. You can realize your dreams. You just have to work hard and believe in yourself, just like I believe in you." That's the end of the quote. This had a positive impact because through the years, he had less juveniles appear before him more than once. And what I want to let you know is that I had the honor of meeting a gentleman back in 2014 who became the superintendent of schools in Charlotte, North Carolina. His name is Dr. Jim Pewsley, but he is from Tucson, Arizona. And he grew up always remembering what Judge Castro told him, because he wound up appearing before Judge Castro in his courtroom. And that story is in the book, so you will have to look it up in chapter 9 when you get to it. And then last but not least, we will get toward the end of the book to this paragraph that says Raúl Castro won the election in 1974 and became Arizona's 14th governor. This is a quote. On January 1st, 1975, I was inaugurated as governor of the state of Arizona. Soon after being sworn in, I received a telegram at my office. Well, back then they were telegrams. Nowadays it would be an email or a tweet or a text or something, right? But they didn't have that back in 1975. The telegram came from Eileen Wright of Seattle, Washington, and it asked, "Are you the same Raúl Castro I had as a 6th grade student in Douglas, Arizona?" This was an extraordinarily emotional moment for me. I called her on the phone and said, "This is Raúl Castro, the governor of Arizona, your former 6th grade student. Thank you for inspiring me to always do my best." So that is what I have to share about Raulito. And you see, he becomes Raúl at some point. And at the end of the book, there's a wonderful poem written by Alberto Álvaro Ríos, who is the Arizona Poet Laureate. And it's called The Man Who Does Not Leave Us, Raúl H. Castro. Por supuesto, está en español, en la parte que está en español en el libro. And this is a poem that Alberto, who I call Tito because I grew up with him in Nogales also, being the poet laureate, he was asked to write this to read at Governor Castro's memorial. So, muchísimas gracias y muy agradecida. Okay, I saw that there was a question. Have there ever been any other Latino or Mexican American governors of Arizona? I believe that's the question. And the answer is no. There have been no others since Raúl Castro, and he was governor in 1970, from 75 to 77. So that was a long time ago. Okay.
Okay, thank you so much, Roni. Now we're gonna, as both authors have said, these books will be available in a flip book style, where one side will be Spanish and the other will be English. It will make it easy for both bilingual readers and for anyone who wants to read it in a specific language. Now we're going to transition into our question portion of the interview. So I will be asking the authors questions, and you feel free to respond in whatever order you prefer. So let's start with, you guys both wrote about big Hispanic heroes. Who was your hero growing up? And en español, los dos escribieron de dos grandes héroes de la historia hispana. ¿Cuáles héroes lo inspiraron a ustedes cuando eran jóvenes?
Mi madrina política es Virginia Musquiz, and that was my heroine. She broke all kinds of barriers. She had TB when she was a teenager, so it had one lung removed. Yet she ran for state representative, the first Chicana woman to run in Texas. And there was no microphones, and you had to do outdoor rallies or go into bar rooms and, pool rooms and all kinds of places. She would scream. She had to. But she never complained about, not being able to breathe or having a difficult time. She didn't win the election, but she did win later as county clerk for the Zavala County under the Raza Unida party. But she's the one that taught me about how to register people, how to get them to pay the poll tax. This is a segregated Texas era. you know, if you were not 21 years old, it didn't matter if you were a man. They treated you like a woman. You had to do the dirty work. Women always do the work in politics and never get the credit. So she taught me all of these things, how to do block work, how to analyze the voter rolls, and so on. So that to me was my hero, because ever since I've been involved in electoral politics, I remember her lessons.
Thank you. Roni?
I would say also my heroine was a teacher who I've actually written some poems about, and was honored to be invited by her family to write her eulogy when she passed away at 90 years old. She was my nursery school teacher when I was 3 until I was 5. And then she became a public school teacher, and she was my 6th grade teacher. And then she was my 7th grade reading teacher. And we kept up a relationship. I didn't find out until much later about her life and how she had suffered when she was a little girl. When she was 4 years old, her father was the postmaster in a very small mining town north of Nogales called Ruby. And actually, you can read about this story. And her mother was a one-room school teacher, and her parents were murdered in front of her when she was 4. And her aunt was there at the time and grabbed her, and they hid under a bed. And so she was raised by her aunt. And, you know, she became the most wonderful, inspiring teacher who loved all her students, no matter what their culture was. And she taught us all about writing, about loving to read, about fine arts and the masters and music. And she was always there for me, no matter what I went through. So
Jessica.
Yes.
Roni is not on the screen. Maybe she got herself off the screen, but it's
She's
blank.
on my screen.
Well, maybe something's wrong with my end, but I don't see her. Anyway,
No worries.
sorry for the interruption.
For both of you, ¿qué herencia han dejado héroes como Ignacio a los latinos que viven hoy en los Estados Unidos? So what heritage do you believe these heroes that both of you wrote about left for our current Hispanic Americans living in the United States?
Bueno, otra vez empiezo. El legado que dejó Ignacio Zaragoza fue que el hombre necesitaba anteojos también, así no como Raúl, that was colorblind, but he just couldn't see well. So can you imagine back then in the 1860s, they had to get glasses that they barely made them, and then you know, if he was a soldier in the battlefield with the sweat and the dirt and falling and so on, he had to care for those glasses, otherwise he couldn't see. So el legado es que no importa de sus limitaciones físicas, él fue campeón, y luego se le murió la esposa, se le murieron los hijos. Este es en la víspera de la batalla, pero no importando los sentimientos personales de la tifoidea que había, del tifus que ocurría. No importa los sentimientos de él, como quiera, encontró la valentía y el coraje para ir a enfrentarse contra los franceses. Ahora, lo último es que él nunca negó que era tejano, que era de acá de los Estados Unidos. Bueno, lo que empezó a hacer Texas y luego los Estados Unidos.
Roni?
Okay, pues para mí, I think I would like to let everyone know that Raúl Castro left an amazing legacy of inspiration, that he was born in Mexico, in Cananea, Mexico, brought into a poor family of 11 children, and his father was sent to the United States because he was fighting for the rights of the Mexicano at the mines in Mexico that were run by Americans, and the Mexicans were not being treated well. So they came to the United States, and they had to learn a new language, and he had to overcome the death of his father. And everything he did it through continuing to persevere and through public education and not giving up, because he went through discrimination his entire life. And that's all in the book. Yeah. Todo viene ahí. Lo importante saber de este Raúl Castro es que en el mismo pueblo donde él se crió, Douglas, Arizona, to this day, I have encountered people, young people who are studying to be now teachers and get into the field of education. Growing up in Douglas, Arizona, they had never heard of Raúl Castro until it came out that I was writing this book. So for me, this is what they're calling at the University of Arizona. It's hidden history. His history should be out there. His story should be out there. And these people are growing up in their own town, the town that he grew up in, y no saben quién es. So hopefully this book is going to not just be a flip book in English and Spanish, but it's going to flip the history and begin to teach young people and adults about this man who is of their culture, porque necesitan saber esto. Es una inspiración tremenda.
Yes. Perseverance, I think, is what both of you were getting at.
Yes.
La perseverancia es algo muy importante que creo que todos los hispanos tenemos definitivamente. De Carmen Peña on Facebook, a question for the authors. Are there any contemporary trailblazers you would like to write about, a biography about, possibly a future book?
Roni, you go first this time.
Well, I've given it a little bit of thought. I've been approached actually to write about Adalberto Guerrero, who's not only a person involved in education, also was one of the trailblazers for bilingual education. And I personally have thought about another Raúl, and that is Raúl Grijalva. And he is our congressman from Arizona to Washington, D.C., but he started out here in Tucson, and I know him a bit personally, and he has quite a story. So hopefully someday. And in between, I have so many other children's books that I want to come out that I wrote long ago, and also working on a TV series and looking for a producer, because that's not my genre. So hopefully I have enough time and energy left and mental capabilities, right, to get the children's books, the TV series, and then write some more biographies. Thank you.
José.
I've got two projects in mind. One is another children's book on La Adelita, and that's a famous song from the Mexican Revolution, but it's a real person, and nobody knows about her other than the song. She had to leave and ended up in Del Rio, Texas, where she died not too long ago. And so she's buried in Del Rio, and people are trying to raise money to get a monument or something to point out who this lady was. So I want to write that. The other one that I want to write about is José Tomás Canales. He was the first Mexican-American state representative in Texas. He also was a county judge and many other things. But when he was a state representative is when the Porvenir massacre of 1918 took place. That's in Texas, and there was a Mexican-American community, and the Texas Rangers and the U.S. Army came in one day and killed all the men over the age of 15, all of them. Massacred them. That's what the Porvenir massacre is called. That's where you can look it up. So Canales got very indignant about this atrocity and decided to call for hearings. Well, it took him a while to get the legislature to approve the hearings, and then he was threatened almost daily to be killed by the Rangers. And 3 of them in particular were there, always tracking him and trailing him, trying to get him to stop the investigation, but he didn't. Now, he did resign. After he finished the investigation, he did resign. And there were some reforms made, but not enough, because the Rangers continued to be thugs. and killers of Mexicans for many, many years. And there's a movement now to try to remove the Texas Ranger baseball team name in Arlington, Texas, because of that. It's being led by Jose Morones out of California. So we'll see. But that I want to write about that.
A suggestion on Facebook, Michelle M. Garcia suggests possibly Judge Lina Hidalgo, which we all know we would all love to learn more about. So that's a fun suggestion. So,
Jessica.
Yes.
May I add one interesting connection here with Jose Angel is that Raúl Grijalva, who I mentioned I would like to write about, his oldest daughter is named Adelita for that exact reason. And here in Tucson, they actually have a group that supports empowering Latina women, and it's called Las Adelitas.
Oh,
so
I love that.
I thought you'd find that interesting.
Okay, this question is specifically for José Ángel. ¿Crees que el tiempo en el que creció Raulito y las dificultades que enfrentó siguen vigente o ahora los latinos tienen más oportunidades?
Pues I think that's better fits Ronnie, no?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ronnie, you're right.
Yes. Yo pienso que las dificultades con las que creció Raulito siguen vigentes. Tal vez un poco menos, tal vez hoy en día los latinos y otras culturas que apoyan a los latinos, que apoyan a la idea que somos uno, que es toda la humanidad y que hay que tener inclusión y no discriminación. Eso está creciendo, ese movimiento, y estamos teniendo más éxito con eso. Pero todavía hay personas que enfrentan muchas dificultades y necesitamos todos unirnos y seguir adelante, eliminando la discriminación de cualquier manera.
Mm-hmm. Gracias, Rani. Okay, another question. So being Hispanic, both of you grew up in this country. What were your biggest barriers growing up, or the biggest impact you felt from being considered not exactly 100% American, like I know I grew up feeling?
Well, I grew up in a segregated South Texas town. I never was Hispanic. I was always Mexican, the Mexican, and reminded of that for a long time. Now, my father died when I was 12. So my mother and I, fell into desperate poverty and had to become migrant farm workers. And only when I traveled up north into the states of Wisconsin and so on, did I realize that being Mexican in Texas was one thing, being Mexican in Wisconsin was another. I didn't have to sit in the back of the theater. I didn't have to wait through the back door of a restaurant. I mean, I even had a couple of dates for the first time, with some Anglo girls. It was a whole different world altogether. So I knew that what was in Texas was not right. What ought to be was what was in Wisconsin. So I kind of became a social activist from then on. And I started doing this since, about the time that I was 12.
So my story, Jessica, es un poco diferente. Me crié con el corazón de mexicana en la frontera, hablando español.
Mm-hmm.
Pero de hecho, soy de familia judía. So I got discrimination in a different way. Okay.
Yeah.
And the first discrimination really came from within my own environment, that I was encouraged not to fall in love with anyone from my hometown and not to marry a Mexican, which I did. And as a result of that, I paid a big price for a while, but at this time of my life, it was a blessing that I was true to myself. My husband and I are going on 49 years, And so that's a whole other story. But I will tell you that as a white person, when my husband and I first got married, he was in a teacher program, a national program called Teacher Corps. And he went from Arizona to Pueblo, Colorado to be in this program. And he was there 6 months before we got married. Y ya que nos casamos, yo me fui con él para allá to finish our college studies, right? And when I got there, he said to me, you're going to find something here that you haven't experienced before, but the friends and the students that are in this program with me son puros Chicanos, and there are a few that are pretty big and rough and macho, and they do not like white people. And it's going to be hard for you. So the first time we were going to go to this party where we were going to meet some of them, he said to me, háblales en español. And that's what I did. I mean, that's what I studied in college too. That was what I got my degree in. And there was this one guy really big and from Nuevo Mexico and northern New Mexico, you know, and kind of scary though, because he was so large and he had this look on his face. And desde el comienzo le platiqué, le hice conversación en español y lloró este señor. Y nos hicimos muy buenos amigos. Él se hizo maestro y cada vez que él les contaba a sus alumnos este cuento de cómo me conoció a mí, que yo le ayudé a sobresalirse de la discriminación. So it was a beautiful story.
Yeah, te entiendo porque como alguien que parece blanca definitivamente te entiendo.
Sí.
Okay, another question. So, is there any experiences in your childhood that contributed to your writing experience? Algo que pasara en su niñez que lo ayudara a escribir estos libros o que le diera razón para escribir estos libros?
Not in my case. I did not write anything other than what I had to do at school and college. But I didn't write anything until I was 22. And of all things, it was my first and last poem. You know, Chicanos, as Ronnie describes us back then, we don't write poems. Maybe a corrido, but not a poem. So it's called 22 Miles. But I wrote it because I had all these feelings of, I began to understand segregation, discrimination, repression, racism, systemic racism. I began to understand all these things. And that's exactly what that poem describes. And it starts off with, at 22 years, I realized my first 8 weren't. And that's, you know, before I went to school and before I was just at home. And my father was a traditional Mexican. He insisted I learn Spanish, reading and writing up to B3, bilingual, biliterate, bicultural. Y mi madre quería que aprender el inglés, and she used to make me read Reader's Digest and, you know, listen to programs in English. So I was able to really work with this. But then LULAC, the League of United Latin American Citizens, began a program called the Little School of 400. And the actual 400 words are there in the public library, you know, Harris or Houston, one of those. They would teach little kids like me 400 basic words in English so that we could get past the segregation, because they would segregate us because we were Mexicans or because we couldn't speak English or whatever excuse, we still were segregated. So that program helped me a lot, because every one of us who went through those little schools of 400 basic words, as far as I know, the ones in my hometown, we all became professionals. We were not held back. In fact, we were promoted at times ahead of time. I graduated when I was 16 because of that. So that was the first thing I wrote. I never wrote again anything else until way later in my career as an electoral activist and politician and whatnot, which was the Gringo Manual on how to handle Mexicans. And then later, many years later, the Chicano Manual on how to handle Gringos. And then the making of a Chicano Mill. All these books are under my name. If you Google, Arte Publico has published several of those.
Okay, well, my story has to do with what I was sharing with you about what I encountered in my own environment. Thus, when I fell in love with my boyfriend after my first year of high school, I was actually sent away to school to California from the border. And that's when I started writing. And for me, writing served as a healing remedio. En ese momento yo no sabía que era un remedio para sanar mi corazón, but I was so angry and lonely. And I like to tell young people that at that time I could have gotten involved in drinking alcohol or drugs because they were available at the boarding school I was at. And I'm very grateful that I did not. And I would wake up sometimes in terror at 2 a.m. and I would write poems to my boyfriend. So a veces en español, a veces en inglés, and then also all of my English assignments were essays about the struggle I was going through. And many decades later, actually, I've gotten to introduce my husband to my English teacher who read all about it. So that's some of my story.
So really quickly, because we are wrapping up, we have about 3 minutes left. So the last question I want to ask you guys, and a quick answer, just anything that you want to say to young readers and young aspiring authors, Hispanic and otherwise.
All of us have lots of stories. Start writing. Tell your story. And it's your truth. Everybody needs to know, and they can respect you because you put out your truth.
Awesome. Thank you.
I agree with that. There's a story in every one of us, and don't feel that yours is less than someone else. It's best that we not compare ourselves to anyone else. It's important. And you know what? Even if it doesn't get published, it's important to have it down as your family history, your community's history. When I wrote my very first book, the story, not the book, My Nana's Remedies, Los Remedios de mi Nana, lo escribí primero en español y lo escribí para enseñarles a mis alumnos de primer año cómo leer. I didn't write it thinking it would ever be published as a book. So write your stories. Keep them right now. If you have computers, you can keep them saved on your computer. And someday, it might take 10, 15 years before you might say, I might try to get this published, or you can self-publish nowadays very easily. So there's a lot out there. Have fun with it. Have fun with it. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jose Angel and Roni. It's been amazing to talk to you. It's been amazing to hear about your book. Let's remember that I really enjoyed this conversation, and let's remember that their books are bilingual, so you can buy the bilingual flip book. And I hope you enjoy Raulito and Ignacio. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you to our authors, Roni and Jose Angel, and thank you to our moderator, Jessica Santos, and thank you to our partners, Arte Publico Press. Remember that you can check out both these books that you learned about today at hcpl.net. Thank you so much. And for more events, be sure to follow HCPL on Facebook and Twitter. Have a good evening, everyone, and let's go Astros.